So I'd like to have what I think would be a fun and enjoyable conversation and hopefully not step on any toes or start any arguments. Let's talk about how do you introduce someone to Lord of the Rings? Now, The Lord of the Rings is my favorite movie series of all time. I absolutely adore them. Over the past year, I've gone back and read the books of the trilogy for the first time. I've also read The Hobbit. So up until recently, it's not been too complicated to introduce someone to Lord of the Rings. You could either start with the Hobbit book or the Lord of the Rings. This is the 1-volume edition trilogy of the books. Or you could start with the Lord of the Rings movies, theatrical editions, maybe the extended editions, or even if you wanted to, you could start with the Hobbit movies since they come first. But more recently, with these Hobbit movies from the past 10 years or so, and now the Rings of Power series, it's a little more complicated. Now, before things get as complicated as the Marvel movies to keep up on, as of now, what's the best way to introduce someone to the Lord of the Rings? Before we talk about my opinions on that, let me give you how I was introduced to it. So I first was shown the Lord of the Rings theatrical editions of the movies back when I was a teenager. I loved them and adored those movies. I was scared the first time I watched them because I was still quite young, but I grew to love the movies. And then I started watching the extended editions, loved those as well. Once the Hobbit movies came out, I was there opening weekend to see each of the Hobbit movies, the theatrical cuts for those ones. And then once those came out, I watched the extended editions of those as well. And then now recently, we've had the Rings of Power series come out the past couple of years, and the timelines getting a little mixed up. So chronologically, you got the Rings of Power, you got the Hobbit, then you got the Lord of the Rings. But what's the actual best way to introduce someone to this series? Because a lot of those prequels, being Rings of Power and the Hobbit, in some ways rely on knowledge of the rest of the movies. So what should we actually do in this situation? Now, movie-wise, a lot of people swear by extended forever and always. And I love the extended of these Lord of the Rings movies. Now, this is my preferred cut of the movies to watch. I have the 4K set as well, but just wanted to show this one. So in my personal opinion, this is my preferred way to experience the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But for someone who's a first-timer delving into the world of Middle-earth, my recommendation is going to be either start with the books, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. If you're into reading, give these a read. They're fantastic books, really, really well written. If books aren't necessarily your thing, like they were for me growing up, I only, like I said, just read this trilogy over the past couple of years for the first time. Start with the theatrical cuts of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. My personal reasoning behind this is there's better pacing movie-wise throughout these films. Each of these is about 3 hours long, where each of the extended cuts is 4 hours long. So there's just stronger pacing in these movies. Now, I love all of the stuff that fills in the extended versions of those scenes and the additional scenes that they put in. It just adds to the depth and the living, breathing world of Middle-earth and its characters and creatures that fill it. But if you're a first-timer, you're not going to care about a lot of that stuff. You just want to understand the story, understand the majority of the characters, and be able to follow along with it because there's a lot that's going to happen. So if you're a first timer and you're either have already read the books of The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, or you're not necessarily interested in the books, just check out the theatrical cuts of the movies first. I know chronologically the Hobbit movies come first, but you're going to want to start with The Lord of the Rings. Now, while these movies are really entertaining and they add some cool stuff to the story, we did not need 3 movies to tell this story, but that's what we got. So you got to make the best of it. So they're still fun. I recently watched the extended cuts over the past couple of years for the first time. I think I prefer the theatrical for these just because they already added a lot of fluff just in the theatrical cuts because they extended this to this. And so we already had extra stuff, but they added even more extra stuff. Now, some of it I liked, but for the most part, I still prefer the theatrical cuts for the Hobbit movies. So if you're going to get someone into this for the first time, my personal recommendation and suggestion would be check out either the books or the theatrical cuts of The Lord of the Rings first, and then go check out the Hobbit movies after that, and then go check out Rings of Power. So it's going to be reverse chronological order, but I think that's the best way to do it. And it's actually chronological for when stuff released. I still think that's my favorite and preferred way to do it. After you've gone through, you know, the theatrical cuts of Lord of the Rings and then the Hobbits, and you want some more, go check out those extended cuts, especially of Lord of the Rings. They add a lot of fantastic, really exciting, interesting depth to that world and the characters. Like I said, still prefer the extended cuts of Lord of the Rings as my preferred version of that trilogy. It's not everyone's, but I still love it. So hopefully we didn't step on too many toes or start up too many arguments in the comments. I think everyone's entitled to their own opinion on the best way to experience these. Some of those Tolkien purists out there would probably say just read the books and don't watch any of the movies or TV shows, but it's there. So I wanted to give my own inputting suggestion on this. I thought it'd be a fun discussion. So hopefully you're joining me down in the comments below with your preferred way to watch or even introduce someone to the Lord of the Rings. I would love to see other people's opinions and picks in the comments down below. Thanks for checking out this video and sticking around to the end. I'll see you in the next one.